Damn you. Let me win. I'm a huge winner. Jerk. Difficult. You're
How you doing? I don't know me. I told him making a small dish. Look at the size of this thing. It weighs 13 pounds. Two gigantic meatballs, chicken frangies, and one of my favorite pastas, penny alla vodka. I don't know. Don't forget Frankie and Joe's in Pleasantville. Look at this. When I go to my friend's place, they give me 25 pounds of food. I want to lose a few pounds, but I'll do this good. God bless, guys.
Nope. Hey, just give me 1 minute. I'm just putting in one more light and then we'll get going. How are you today?
I'm doing well. Are we going to see our faces on this? Is this visual too?
Do you want to do what do you want to do? Do you
Whatever
want
you
to do
want to do.
camera or no camera? It's up to
What
you.
whatever you want to do. Let's do camera.
Okay, that'll be more fun. So just give me one moment. All right.
Take your time.
All right, perfect. Just one, two. All right, there we go. Okay. All right, there we go. All right, there we go. All right, everyone. One, two, three. Welcome to Autism Experience Podcast, guys. I'm back for another recording session, and this time I have a very, very ambitious person. Last year, I did an internship with this man, and he helped challenge and channel some of my new content creation skills. Let's welcome today the founder of Rentah, who is also going to explain about rentah throughout this, Anup Yogi Desi. So, my first question to you, my friend, who do you help professionally?
Right on. Thank you for that introduction. Um, well, I am the founder of Renta, but I'm also a adjunct professor of geography. So I always try to help my students, like to me, like teaching and students and they're they're probably the people that are the most important to me, when it comes to work and renta means a lot to me too, but a lot of that inspiration comes from my students, I would say. And then
All
after
right,
that, it would be my community.
your community. So let's backtrack and let's start with some of your story. On this podcast, as I talk about my life experience, we also have you, the guest, or whoever the guest is, talk to us a little bit about their backstory. And, then it goes kind of structured throughout the conversation. So, you were you were you a transplant to New York, like you came with your parents, or were you born here?
Yeah, I was born here, 1984,
1
Brooklyn,
year before me. Where did your parents immigrate here from?
India, Gujarat, India, Ahmedabad.
Ah, you're from the area of India that gets credit for Prime Minister Modi.
Yes, and actually, they take pride in being the birthplace for Gandhi as well, Mahatma Gandhi.
I didn't know Gandhi was from that section of India, but that's a very interesting fact, and that's something I might do myself a little research on.
I
So,
also think Freddie Mercury's parents are from that part of India too, but they're
Freddie Mercury, the
Farsi.
mixed singer.
Yeah, of course, of Queen. Yeah, one of the greatest entertainers of all time. So,
Oh God. Just so everybody knows throughout this, since Anoop was born 1 year before me and I was born 1 year after, so if you catch a lot of nostalgia references, it's only because we're at the top of the millennial generation. So,
that
all
was that a
right,
nice way
so
of saying we're old and people aren't gonna get the references?
Basically, at this point, there's a lot of 90s and 2000s stuff I don't think anyone's gonna get. But
Wonderful.
when
I,
your
you know what?
parents
I
chose
think they
when your
made the
parents
movie.
chose to come here to America, what was their big reason?
Yeah, opportunity, an opportunity generally stands for economic opportunity, the ability to work, make money.
Where did they end up settling in New York?
Well, it was Brooklyn, then it was Staten Island, and now it's Jersey. I think it's like the typical migratory route of most immigrants, and they'll probably end up in Florida or somewhere.
No, that's the traditional path for most families coming from New York. Usually, it if it either the child in our situation was always somehow born in the city. And like you said, parents either move out to one of the boroughs, as you mentioned, Staten Island, New Jersey, or up north to Westchester. At one point, Westchester County was a little more affordable to be able to live in when our parents' generation, the boomers, were coming up in the city. But then, obviously, because things got a little expensive, as you said, traditionally the retirement path ends up being Florida.
Yeah, exactly.
So, with that said, all right, where did you go to high school?
I went to high school at Susan Wagner High School in Staten Island. I graduated in '02.
Oh, two, that was literally 2 years before me. All right, so what were your good subjects and what did you go to college for originally? Because now this is where the story is going to actually start.
In high school, I wasn't that good of a student. My favorite class, I had a teacher, Mr. Altieri. He taught uh the book Lord of the Flies. So that was my favorite thing I think I learned in high school. And it taught me about like symbolism and maybe human nature, what we're capable of. It opened my mind up. And then in college, I ended up doing philosophy. So like I studied a lot of liberal arts, and I enjoyed like philosophy, psychology, sociology, just how the mind works, how people work.
See, philosophy, I can definitely see as a good course. And it's actually funny because my actual first major when I went to community college was marketing. Actually, no. I started out as communications because I wanted to go into the film industry. A
Okay.
semester later, when I found out they didn't have enough of a good film school or film editing programs or film program in general, I switched over to marketing because it had the creative ability to, possibly with that on my resume and background, end up somewhere, maybe, working for a TV station. At least that was my first thought. Unfortunately, the first college, community college, took me about 4.5 to 5 years, for almost 5 years just to finish up there from '04 to '09. Since you went consecutively in '02, which was your first fall in college, I was a junior that year. So we're about 2 years behind the other.
Can I ask you a question? What made you want to get into film? What movies did you like? Like what
It
led to that?
wasn't so much about movies at that point. Back in high school, I liked film editing because
Okay.
I had taken a bunch of courses. So why I chose film originally was because it was a creative skill that I did really well with when I was editing. That was the first path that I wanted to end up, going toward. Unfortunately, I think if I look back from the midpoint of my 30s to now where I'm podcasting, this is kind of back where I started in a
Okay.
sense because it was one way to work with technology. What actually ended up happening was rather interesting from community college to Mercy when I ended up in business from marketing. Mercy College in the fall of '09 or the no, in the fall of '08 announced they were going to be doing a specialized major called Business Administration and Sports Management. So when I was deciding that I wanted to transfer after I acquired 72 credits at community college, I ended up deciding on Mercy for that particular reason because I figured that would get me closer to possibly working at or interning at a TV network. At least
Okay.
that was back then. But the problem for me was first, being on the autism spectrum, I didn't have the best grades. And that's just by the fact that coming out of high school, I had a 2.25, 2.05. I got all the way up to 2.7 one term, and then when I finished college in about 9 years total, I ended up with a 2.27 overall. So not the best, like you, similar, not the best grades.
Yeah, I think I graduated with like a 2.7 or two. I have no idea. If somebody asked me my grades now, if I applied for a job, I would like laugh at them. I'd be like, grow up. Like, like ask me about my like life experience. You
Well, for some employers, when we were back at that age, the GPA was necessary. For some employers who see, and I learned a little dirty secret with recruiting about it, which was kind of sad. So, the better grades you had numerically, let's say if you had a high three or closer to a four, you would typically get tracked and be able to work in better places, was really all it was useful for, or it would move you up a little further to the recruiter. But like you said, if you look at your grades now, you're like inappropriate.
Yeah, even then though, like I don't know. You pass, you pass. You get like sometimes you get lucky with teachers, and sometimes you have teachers that are hard asses, like so. In the end, it's difficult to ascertain how much somebody learned if all you're doing is just looking at the grades. Should be
Yeah,
what have they done? What have they
I
contributed?
think we got more open-minded as we entered the 2010s. Since you and I were considered young adults back then, now we're just adults. If I if I look back on how grading was back then, they focused more on grades. In 2019, I had a math teacher who'd been living here a very long time, or a math professor in Math 116, this class, I failed that class. Since you were a college adjunct, you'll get a kick out of this. Guess how many times I had to take Math 116, which is why it almost got to 10 years in school?
Three?
17.
What? Come
I
on,
failed
man.
Math 116 16 times and I passed on the 17th.
Just cheat at that point. You gotta just finish.
Well, we grew up on chalkboards, which was very difficult for somebody on the autism
I know,
spectrum.
I know.
So
I'm
when
just
they switched
busting your
over to
chops.
module-based math, it became a lot easier. Like Udemy courses.
Yeah, yeah, I'm just busting your chops, but
And
yeah.
that's perfectly fine because I don't mind that since we still work together, in some ways, and we'll touch on that. Okay. So since you mentioned college students, let's ask you about when you got out of school, what did you want to do first for work?
I worked at a bar. I managed a bar in the city. Like I was like interning, and then a couple people quit, and then I became like kind of like the office manager, and then I gave myself like a bartending job. And yeah, I enjoyed working a little bit in like nightlife and hospitality. It was like fun. It was enjoyable. But yeah, I always had like describe me like ambition to do like bigger things. So, but
And
I always enjoyed the jobs for fun.
that's completely understandable. So we know you ended up as a founder. Exactly how long has Renta been around?
Too long, man. No, I'm kidding. Like about 12 years I've been working on it. A while.
Interesting. Okay, so 12 years ago, if we're in 2026, would have been 2017 about?
No,
No,
like 20, like
2015,
yeah,
right?
like 2015, yeah.
So what gave you the idea for Renta around 2015? That was about the midpoint of the 2010s.
Yeah. Let's see. I was in Denmark and I had a friend that had a similar concept out there that was doing pretty well, this idea of renting everything. And something clicked in my brain because I was like looking for this, like how scientists will have this thing like theory of everything. And so I was like, I've always been looking for like, what is this theory of, I don't know, everything with business to make like things work, like, win, 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 win scenarios. And there's so many problems with the environment, with the economy, politics, whatever. It's like it's mind-boggling. It's hard to deal with. But when my friend told me this concept of like renting, and I was like, oh, it's like renting goods, it's renting services, it's renting spaces. Why? What is renting? Renting is like incentivized recycling. It's like reusing a product. Like we all have stuff at home that we don't use. We all have skills that we could monetize, right? Like that we're good at. That maybe we don't think like, how can I make money off this? But there are clever ways, like magic, for example, like somebody that's good at magic. Like you could do birthday parties, you could teach people magic, you could tutor, whatever. And how do you get people to stop fighting? It's like, I think business does that. If you start exchanging money and memories, uh, and you're doing it all in a community and you start to get to know each other, like you start to like really form a bond. And I just saw Renta as like potentially this vehicle that could do a lot of good in the world.
So it was more that you wanted to do something that would bring about what you considered social change at that point, which some entrepreneurs do get this idea that I believe whatever I do for a business should either originally, when I went to business school and took economics, the reason that we were at least taught, but I would dispute that now at this point, is you go into business to make money. What you're saying is an iteration of some people don't go into business to make money. They see an opportunity in the market that needs to be addressed, or they feel it's not about the product, but I want to create something that might be unique or test out an idea, even if it's the most niche of ideas that, it either will make it'll make social impact.
Yeah, I think you said that really well. I think it was definitely,
You were looking more at the social side because
yeah.
I mean, at least in the last 10 years, there's a founder I'm thinking of, Chamath, all the way out in San Francisco, who started a quantitative hedge fund, if I remember correctly, which is still open today. But his idea was something completely different because it's hedge fund and financial services. But he wanted to do more social good in the world, was I think kind of his founding idea.
I think that person started off that way, Chamath, if I think we're talking about the same person, but now he's a huge douchebag. Like he's like he like started a couple companies that were SPACs where he took advantage of investors. He's not the
Money
right
changes people.
money changes people, sure, yeah. You're right about that.
Especially in financial services. Everyone who says, I'm going into financial services because I want to maybe create an experience or a better service-based type of a product that can compete. In all reality, financial services is one of the most highly regulated industries out there. And you're right, because since it probably is the same person, of course, financial services and the money he was taking in and cheating investors was a huge problem.
Yeah. But going back, you're right. For me, it was more about social change, but I do believe in the power of money. Like, I could have made Renta a nonprofit, but I think business has the ability to create greater change, and money could provide fuel for that.
Money can provide fuel for that. Now,
But like you said,
nonprofit is very tricky, and I was actually just with a client today for my audience. I'm co-founding a think tank idea with a different friend, and we were just
nice.
going through something today. We were going through his documents, and I showed him some stuff in Chat GPT. He asked me, should I do a hedge fund under the nonprofit guys? And ChatGPT said what I was exactly going to say to him, which is this isn't going to work. A hedge fund
Yeah,
as a nonprofit, because
yeah,
hedge funds' goals are to basically make profit.
exactly. Exactly.
So you're right. Could you have done a nonprofit? That's questionable for this model. And since since your model is basically all about renting out goods and services, since it's been around for 12 years, what was the steps like to create the business plan, and then how did you pitch it to investors?
Yeah, I just like winged it. I'm not really a businessman, right? Like I'm a teacher. I just kind of had this idea. I thought it was simple. Like you get people to build a website, you get people to talk about the website, and then you get people to download it, and use it. And it wasn't that easy. There's a lot of competition. You have to keep rebuilding it, reworking it. Trends change. That was like it went from like a website desktop era to like a mobile era to then an app era. And then each time you have to go with the flow, right? And then like now we're in this AI era. And so yeah, it's an experiment, and you got to keep like analyzing it and fixing and building and polishing and
It's
studying the
just
market.
like all the people who are. You just unleashed a fun conversation that I think we should go into a little bit today that's related to renta and technology. You just hit a topic that is not only very controversial, but everyone has their opinions on it, and they're mixed. AI.
Yeah.
So there, all the content with AI is very mixed, especially on LinkedIn. Some people like it. They think it's innovative. They think it's cool. There's people like myself who I use it for what it should be used for, which is a basis of asking questions, planning out business, planning out, future education and, and how I can do with my money, strategize on how to build things. But then there are people who use artificial intelligence in place of a therapist or in place of actual physical dating, where it's like, this was not what AI was made for originally. Now we're
Yeah.
just coming into some of the more absurd, uses of it. And then you got people who are looking for jobs out there that are so desperate, they'll let ChatGPT draw up their resume. I'm sure you could tell me stories about first, have you had students who've used AI to write essays?
Yeah, but I don't make my students even write essays anymore because AI could do that. I make them do like oral presentations. I make them talk to me and see if they understood what the documentary or book or reading, whatever that we're discussing. AI is useful, but it shouldn't be everything. So I think
Well,
everybody
AI
has
can
to
write an
adapt.
essay, but we're also not I also feel like, especially with Gen Z and now the children of millennials who are going to be called Gen Alpha and some who are becoming parents now, Gen Beta. I feel like the problem with relying on artificial intelligence is you're not teaching them how to actually write an essay from scratch or use your head, the way we grew up.
Yeah, that's a good point. But I teach geography, so my goal isn't necessarily to
Oh
teach
no,
it.
understandable. Geography is just more about continent, countries, capitals,
No.
cities.
So this is what most people think, but really geography is the study of the earth and everything in it, right? So that's like people, that's
Oh,
places,
sciences.
but that's how it's really how the environment shapes our economy, how the environment shapes our culture, how the environment shapes our politics, and then how all of these things blend together. So geography goes really deep into that. A lot of times we think, and you're not wrong, like there is definitely capitals and countries and borders, but it goes deeper.
So then I'm guessing with the geography that I learned was more history versus the one you're talking about, which is learning about the Earth.
No, there's still history involved too, but it's understanding why certain places are important, right? Like New York doesn't just form because a bunch of smart people went there. It's smart people went there because it was easy to get there. There was a beautiful harbor. It was on the East Coast, so it's closer to Europe. Like there's good land there. There's tons of oysters. People were able to eat. Also, the Hudson River flowed in there, so you were able to go inland via the Hudson River. So New York City became important
And
because of its
actually, the original
geography.
name was New Amsterdam.
Yes, yes.
Since you were in the country where since you were in the Netherlands, and the Netherlands were the first group of people here that came to New York.
Hmm.
So in order to be a geography teacher, what did you have to take in college?
I got my master's in international relations, so it was very similar.
And then after the bar, how did you transition into becoming a college professor?
I'm an adjunct professor, so really it's just being a teacher. You got to apply, you know, and I had experience traveling and studying abroad at different schools. I had experience working in other countries, volunteering in other countries, and I had also graduated from the place that I teach, the College of Staten Island. So I basically applied and I said I understood the student body and I could make a dynamic class, and they gave me a chance.
Interesting, but you needed a master's to qualify, obviously.
Yes, yes.
That's the only thing. Okay, good to know for anyone who's looking to eventually become a college professor, which might be a path that I look to go down myself. So, who in your life? Oh yeah, you already answered that question. How can people reach you?
They can find me on LinkedIn. I think it's Anup Yogesh Desai. Hold on, let me check right now, make sure.
Anup
Yeah,
Yogi Desai, I think.
yeah, Desai. So uh, Anup. Middle name is Yogesh, Yogesh. Last name Desai, Desai.
All right. Let's see. I covered that. So I think we definitely have a good array of topics, but I think the one thing that I want to know, especially when building a business, because now let's focus on renta. So the idea for renta basically is renting out goods and services. When you came to this idea, what were you envisioning?
Yes, I was envisioning something similar to that already existed, like a Craigslist, like a community of people, a place to go, not to talk
Without all the
politics.
scamming.
Yeah, that feels organic. That's not uh, a place to like talk about politics or memes or bullshit, like a place of business where people can exchange goods and services and spaces and reuse things in a way that keeps value within communities, you know? And really like a place for them to express themselves. I think Craigslist gave people that opportunity where like stuff like Uber, TaskRabbit, they put you in this box where I wanted people to be free to be who they are on our app, you know?
So, did you have to hire a whole team of software developers or one individual developer?
Yeah, now I work with a team in India, and yeah, we tried different things in the beginning and the end. I think it's better to start smaller now, you know? But
So, since you've been going for 12 years, you went between big and then small, or you have most of your teams overseas?
yeah, it's overseas now, and it's, yeah, we went from big to small, right? And like a little bit more focused, and that's partially because, we had to bootstrap everything, so you have to make sure like every dollar spent in the right way, and yeah, like that you don't do anything recklessly, you just build slow and smart.
That's the challenging thing with business nowadays, even just in the Fortune 500 companies, because it sounds like you're not the only one doing it, but that was always a big corporate thing to do, which
Yeah.
was nowadays, for whatever reason, with AI, they find it easier to, send some of their teams overseas, to as you're talking about with the dollars, whether I agree with it or not, is a different story, but I can understand the logic behind hiring people overseas.
Yeah, you have to sometimes.
No, that is very true because especially as I'm building my own business and determining, do I want to hire a bunch of people? Do I want to do it as me for right now with this podcast? Because my actual idea with this podcast that you're on is under an umbrella company is today me and the client decide who's a friend of mine from high school decided once I go to register, it's going to be as a for-profit media, social media agency or for-profit agency. Now, I'm gonna have it be remote because what I was looking at is probably what you ran into when you were registering your business here. You need $2,000 up front just to get your business registered here in the state of New York, whether it's if it's an LLC,
Yeah.
which includes the publication fees, and being out in the public, which I can understand. But I know to even start a traditional business, you needed a lot of money. So, like you said, sometimes unfortunately you do have to go overseas, for certain labor things, and it's understandable.
Yeah, it's all risky, right? Like you said, and sometimes the state you do it in and the rules are not conducive to the little man, you know? But
That's
sometimes
a
you just gotta
whole
fight
nother
through and be
issue,
creative.
especially within the state of New York, because I have a friend in Massachusetts and he works for one of their government agencies. We were actually talking about this one day. So I showed him a compiled thing of costs about what it would take to start a business in New York. And then I said to him, the prompt I'm showing you from AI includes startup costs for New York as an LLC, Delaware, and Wyoming. And I framed it to him like this. Which of these three states would you go to if you were a business owner to start up in? And I said to him, unfortunately, as much as I love the state is not cheap for people wanting to start out in a business. So it's like, I'd probably go to Wyoming. I'm like, now you're thinking like a business owner because
Yeah.
unfortunately, high cost to entry is not always good, is not always easy accessible for everyone.
Yeah, it's not. And you want multiple people to be able to get into business and bring their ideas to the table.
So, yes, and that's the biggest thing. Now, since most of your workforce is overseas, do you maintain employees here in the States? And if so, are they remote or do you have an office?
Yeah, we're all remote, right? I have somebody in Brazil, I have somebody in South North Carolina, my team in India. We're all remote, and then I have a couple interns that are here on campus with me when I teach, right? They're like students of mine. So, yeah, everything is kind of organized in a simple manner. And then hopefully, yeah, when we get big funding, maybe we'll start to do things like a little bit more traditionally. But
But
I
I
I
also
like
would
remote
say
work.
this when you're starting out a business, whether you're an autistic person or whether you're someone like yourself who, has his own challenges in life. Starting the way you are is what a lot of people have been doing for the last almost 20 years since 2010, which is you start at home, you don't get an office until you have the money, you save profits up, you go as lean as possible like you're saying. I'm sure your overseas are probably 1099s, but do you pay them in their currency or in American currency?
In American currency.
Oh, so they have to file taxes with our government, correct?
I have no idea about any of that stuff. So
That's the part of being a
I let my
business owner that
accountant.
some business owners do become a little aware of. But if you don't know, you don't know. The only reason I put that out there was because, you're going international. But then, when you talk about someone in North Carolina, that's just, at least they're on a New York salary, which is probably not a bad thing.
Yeah.
And yes, obviously, I'm sure the biggest challenge for 12 years wasn't necessarily the whole remote thing, but yes, getting funding is one of the most difficult, beginning aspects of a business. And that's one of the reasons, I'm still doing research for you on this. And I will have some people this year, because I'm pitching for my friend. I'm coming up with his presentation. So my next logical step is to also create a presentation for you on rentah. So when we get done with this, if you wouldn't mind, do you have your annual report from last year?
No, I don't right now, but we could talk about that after the pod. But yeah, it's not a we don't have our annual report, but I'm working on something.
Okay, because all I would need from you to send me over are numbers and then, kind of like what everything that you accomplished last year. And then, on my end, I put together a presentation.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. We could do that.
Yeah, that's going to be one of the things under the investor relations, part of it that I do for you, put that together so you can pitch. And then I have something, a copy for myself, and then I can start floating it out to people because I'm doing this for my friend also at the same time.
Okay, wonderful. Being a connector, right on.
Yeah. So besides my social media agency, the other thing that I want people to know is I'm selling I'm selling a few things that you and others might be interested in. The first is if anyone in your audience is looking for someone to explain the different levels of autism, one of my services is called autism training or autism consulting. They can reach me on LinkedIn by email, benjaminvabner@gmail.com, or you can find me on Instagram, BV99001,
Okay.
and we can talk about the possibility of in your own audience me doing a presentation for them via Zoom for $150, or if they want me on site, I'd have to negotiate with them a different type of a price, but that's one thing. I'm also
Okay.
selling a partner accountability service with a friend of mine in Canada who's also a mentor. His name is Dan Freidenberg. We're basically selling people the idea of when you had your idea, I'm sure you had people hold you accountable for it. So that's kind of what we're doing. It's a white glove service where you come to us with your ideas, we help you put them down on paper and then choose the best one. And then each week, whatever your goals are, we do check-ins to make sure that you achieve those goals.
I love that. That's a great service. You should put that on Renta and we'll promote that on the
Oh,
thing.
absolutely. I'm going to do that afterwards. And I'm also going to talk with my mentor about that possibility later in the week. And maybe I'll even eventually get you, him, and my other friend who I'm co-founding something with all on a group call together. All right.
Okay, great.
So thank you for coming by tonight. I thought we would be able to do an hour, but that's okay. 36 minutes of just good stuff was, a
Yeah.
good conversation tonight. And we'll talk soon, my friend. All right.
All right. All the best, Ben. Thank you for having me. And
You're welcome, Anup.
yeah, shout out to everybody in the audience. Good luck with everything in life. Much love.
Yep. All right. Hold on. Let me. Okay.